my age all learned to fish the same way. They went to a general sporting goods store. They sold these big, long bamboo cane. You put a line on the end and a worm and a sinker, and you went out and you fished. It's tenkara fishing. I think it's the best way to learn the basics of fly fishing. And then you can apply that to regular rod and reel.
I love to do what the river tells me to do, and it only takes a minute or two to find those clues, to uncover those clues.
I always try to think like a fish. I want to guess where, if I was a fish, I would stay.
So normally my line's down here, and I want to cast up here. So I bring it up, I lay the line down, and then I do a roll cast.
You stop high and then let it go down. So this will give you a very high, delicate presentation.
These are the presentation casts I'll use to fish dry flies in water such as this.
You know, somebody said, the more you know, the less you need, and that's what I'm working towards, just more and more simplicity. And in fact, for me, it's the most satisfying method of fishing, because it's the simplest. I think the time has come to reimagine, not just housing, but, you know, the future of business, I think, is waste. I mean, that's tremendous amount of money to be made with waste. And that's what this is. I'm Ivo Schwina, past owner of Patagonia, now a working stiff. I was interested in straw bale for 50 years. I always thought that that's the way to build something. There's a lot of straw out there. I think the time has come to reimagine, not just housing, but everything else.
Oh yeah. You got these guys?
Nickel and bale.
These things?
Yeah.
Grab them that way. Yeah, they can. You want to stack one?
Oh, no, thanks.
Chris, quit yelling! For me, I just always had a drive to be an architect. I really was drawn to that as a career from a pretty young age. But buildings around the world account for about 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions in the global economy. So it's a huge part of climate change. So to combine my passion for design and creating spaces with something that can have a positive impact on the climate side of things, to me is just sort of the sweet spot and where I want to spend my time working. So we've been building a straw bale house.
I think we're going to get nowhere in trying to save this planet with an attitude that we're not part of nature. And so the more natural you can make a house, I think the better off you are.
Where we are now with the climate crisis and the urgency around this is to get the building sector carbon neutral in the next couple of decades. So that's where materials like straw bale can play a big part.
Straw goes back as far as adobe goes, which is all the way back. We are one of the growing edges, and there are many others, of a 10,000-year-old building tradition that goes back to the beginning of humans making buildings. Straw is a good building material because it's actually hard to burn when it's compacted. It doesn't actually decompose that easily unless it gets really wet and stays that way. It's non-toxic and it's highly insulating. And in the last 3 or 4 years, people have gotten really interested because it's pretty unbeatable in terms of climate action.
Working with alternative building, not just for the sake of being alternative and hippies in the woods, but as it's emerging, it's relevant to climate crisis because natural building, as it's called, straw bale being sort of the poster child, is low carbon building and in fact carbon storing building. And so we can now make our buildings be sponges to absorb the carbon we pull out of the sky. Everything we build from now on can and should be storing carbon. Easiest way to do it is with plants. They do it naturally all the time. Just let Mother Nature do the work and then build your house out of it.
The reason that there's a decent amount of straw building in California is we grow a lot of rice. Straw is typically considered a waste, or I call it a byproduct, and that definitely makes it exciting to build with. It allows us to diversify and also close cycles in agricultural ecosystems in a really nice way, sequestering carbon and adding a revenue stream for farmers. Straw supply chains are pretty short. The farmer, the baler, it gets put on a truck, it goes to the building site.
Just the love of farming. That's the only thing I can say it is. I started here in 1968. So what's that, 54 years. And we grow rice in the Sacramento Valley here, and then we got into the baling world. Here we are. That's the actual rice plant. Combine comes through, whacks it off, drops it down the stroke. This is what it started as, here's what it comes out as. We only bale 40% of the acreage in California. So there's a lot of material that never gets used. They disc it back in the soil. From the fields, they get picked up, stacked. Once it's here, it's on a truck and leaves. That bale might be in somebody's house someday, who knows? We send at least 10 to 15,000 to building every year. That'll be Corky. He's my over-the-road guy. He's been out here a long time, does a good job. You tell him to be there at 8 o'clock, he's there at 8 o'clock.
I drive a truck for a living, I always have.
My first load of hay I ever loaded, I was 10 years old. My dad asked me if I wanted to make $5.
One of the things, the characteristics, I think if people, your customers, maybe people in this room, were to free associate adjectives that have to do with Patagonia, it would be authentic. Authenticity, if the company is you and at the top and everybody else, and the way you present what you do is authentic. I think that's a struggle for a lot of people in this room. What can you, the struggle is not to be authentic, but it's to be seen as authentic. What can you tell people in this room what you've learned? Some of the people who are having a hard time communicating and being seen that their company is authentically dressing and concerned about these things.
You know, I can't really answer that one. I think it may be that you're not authentic.
What would be the sign? What would indicate that
you know, the millennium, it's a new millennium generation. These young kids, they see through all that bullshit. You can't fake it. And they're really different than you and I and the rest of us in this room here. And they're the new generation, and they've had enough education into what's going on with the planet, and by God, they want to do something about it. I was on a panel with a bunch of people from the surf industry, a bunch of CEOs from the largest companies in the surf industry, and we were describing what we do with our businesses and how we operate and stuff. And one of the CEOs said, "Oh yeah, well we tried to do organic cotton hats and T-shirts and stuff before the recession hit, but then the recession hit and we had to cut back." Well, that very same company right now had to bring in a gunfighter to chop the heck out of the company because it's going to go belly up. Here's a guy in the surf business who didn't understand what his customer is. These new young people from 13 to 20 years old, they're really different.
Reminds me of that old line, authenticity is everything in business, and if you can fake that, you've got it made.
1968, you took a trip that you say shaped your life. You drove a 10,000-mile trip down the Pan American Highway. It was dirt then. So tell us about that trip and how it shaped your life.
Well, I've been on a lot of different expeditions and trips, but the longer they are, the more you get something out of them. And this was a 6-month trip. And so we left Ventura, California with an old van. This was Doug Tompkins and myself and some other folks. And we loaded the van up with surfboards and skis and climbing equipment. Bought an old Bolex 16mm camera and took off surfing all the way down to Lima. Went to Chile and climbed volcanoes and skied down them. That's where I learned to ski. Crossed over the Andes and went over and climbed Fitzroy, a real famous mountain that had been only climbed twice, and we did a new route on it. We made a film on the whole thing, and that's when I fell in love with that country, the southern end of South America called Patagonia. And it affected Doug Tompkins a lot, and myself, and that's why I named my clothing company Patagonia, because I wanted to make clothing for those kind of conditions, like Cape Horn and wild mountains and wild weather, and that was a big effect. That was 1968, and it was a wild trip. I mean, you wake up sometimes sleeping on the ground in Guatemala with guns at your head. A lot of adventures.
They're two very different characters. The project in Swell Meadows is very unique. It's for a certain kind of client that's really interested in environmental building in a kind of wild and rugged place against the mountains.
Push, 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 push.
To walk up to the site, you for the first time really get a sense of the experience of a straw bale house.
We felt comfortable with it because Dylan is doing another project with straw bale, and they're like kind of ahead of us.
A whole big crew of friends and climbers and community members are going to come out and stack these bales in between the post and beam framing and really get the enclosure of the building in place. It's really not a big stretch from how you do it traditionally. It's just a few things are a little bit different, and all the subcontractors up here that are working on the job, it's their first time working with straw bale, and so far everyone's been really receptive to trying a new way.
Finding a contractor has been really important for us. Bud's been a great partner in learning all about it.
I'm always stressing out because I'm a general contractor, so every moment's kind of stressful. We got a huge kind of short-term workforce, a lot of climbers.
You guys start working together.
Seems like the crew's good, everybody's psyched, super fun, hard workers.
You know, they say you are what you eat, and I've been eating a lot of straw, so I feel one with the straw.
This is a lot more fun. Everyone has their own type of experience, but we're all kind of like figuring it out together.
Don't stab yourself with the hooks.
Don't stab your friends with the hooks.
Don't stab your friends.
Definitely don't stab your boss with the hooks.
You know, up where it needs to go and like roughly cut out where it needs to notch around the post. I got an idea. It's just kind of fun moving it around. It's also eliminating the drywall, siding, and the sheathing and all that. So that's just like a ton of extra work. Oh, it's looking pretty good.
People who build these houses out of this stuff, you know, they're smart.
The straw bale house is not that different than a wood-framed house. It has less sticks in it, has less 2x4s, and it insulates a lot better. Straw bales, which are serving the same role as fiberglass insulation, only without using petrochemical products. You're using what the farmer was throwing away. It's too groovy for school, right?
We're not tired.
No, they're just getting heavier.
This is actually one of the first permitted straw bale homes in the county, which means that now the county knows how to deal with these things. And hopefully somebody gets inspired or somebody realizes there's another permitted straw bale house and they take what we've done and they add to it.
In suburban Ventura, down by the coast, with a really different goal of creating a simple suburban house that has appeal to the masses. There's just a really elegant simplicity to the whole thing.
It's a win-win-win deal. I mean, with just rice straw in California, you could build 2,000 square foot homes. That's more than the homes built in the United States. Uses less material, more responsible. It makes a superior house. What's wrong with that?
There's a lot of benefits to building with straw bale, but the biggest one in my mind is the ability for the carbon impact of the building to be much, much lower.
When you can know the story of everything that went in, it feels like a home instead of just a track house.
Swing and turn, Jubilee, live and learn, Jubilee. Swing and turn, Jubilee, live and learn.
The other thing that keeps me going in natural building is that it is connective, but it's a tool that's going to help humanity get reconnected to the biosphere, because it's basically how the plants and our human habitat relate to each other. And I think it untells a lot of stories that we don't know that we carry about what our buildings are and how much impact they have to have, and by extension, what we are and how much impact we have to have.
To tackle any big problem, it takes a lot of people doing small things, doing projects one at a time, meeting with people, making films, writing articles, talking to legislators. It's a combination of angles.
Why does this matter, the embodied carbon in my house, or my project, or my local school? Each of us can set an example in our neighborhood and in our community. What can I do? What can we do together?
When I started farming, did I think the straw bale would become a part? That was the farthest thing from our mind. I think more people will know about it, more people would be involved.
It's like David Brower said, the solution to a lot of the world's problems is to turn around and take a forward step. And I really believe that.
So anyway, you guys be good. Hopefully we'll see you one of these days again. Maybe you'll build another house. I'll bring you some straw.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thanks, man.
Yvon Chouinard detests business, but he's a very successful businessman all the same. He's the owner and president of the sportswear giant Patagonia, which he describes as my resource to do something good. Chouinard's father was an impoverished French-Canadian mechanic who moved his family to Los Angeles in 1946. As a teenager, Yvon became a falconer, which led him into rock climbing, which led him into equipment manufacturing, which led him into outdoor apparel. Today, Patagonia is an enormously successful global company, and Yvon Chouinard is a new kind of businessman who believes, he says, that the accepted model of capitalism that necessitates endless growth and deserves the blame for the destruction of nature must be replaced. Patagonia has a wildlife rescue facility at its headquarters, donates 10% of its pre-tax profits to environmental causes, and gives 2-month paid leaves to employees who want to work full-time for environmental organizations. And that's only the beginning. Yvon Chouinard believes that the key to success is to hire excellent people and then let them run the company. This leaves him free to pursue what he calls his MBA, Management by Absence, traveling the world, speaking to environmental causes, and challenging business to reinvent itself. I want to start with a quote by Yvon Chouinard, which was, "If you want to understand the entrepreneur, study the juvenile delinquent." What lies behind that insight?
Well, you know, I think, like I wrote in my book, the juvenile delinquent, you know, he basically says that this sucks, I'm going to do it my own way. And some of the most successful businessmen I know have done it their own way and kind of broken the paradigm. And because, you know, when you're trying to start a business, you want to do something that no one else is doing. I mean, why try to compete against existing businesses? And it takes the juvenile delinquent to have the creativity and the will to go against everything that people say you have to do. And like in, you know, we hire, in my company I have 1,200 employees worldwide. I probably have 2 or 3 with MBAs. I was always a craftsman. My father was a craftsman. My father was born in Quebec, started working at 12 years old, walked over the border into Maine and started working in a mill at 10 years old, actually. 10 years old. But he became a tradesman and could build an entire house by himself. So I kind of inherited those genes, I think. And so I'm an innovator, not an inventor, but I look at products, whether it's a tablespoon or whatever it is, and I can say, that thing's ugly, I could make a better one of those. And so when I was young, I was a mountain climber, and I looked at all the tools for mountain climbing, and they were all really rough and didn't work very well, and they were made really cheaply. And so I thought, I can do better than this. That's how I started out in business. So that's been the story of my business, is just taking existing product, whether it's a dress or whatever, and making it better.
You were actually quite hostile to business. We're, and I suspect, are quite hostile to business in a broad sense, right?
I'm a child of the 60s and stuff. I mean, in the 60s, you were against everything. It's the military-industrial complex, you're against your parents, you're against, you know, everything going on in society. So you're rebelling. And so a lot of those qualities I still have in me.
But you came to believe that business was really the source of the major environmental problems, right? That we needed to, well, capitalism in any case needed to be upended and replaced.
Yeah, eventually. Yeah, I saw that as, I mean, I've had several times in my life when I woke up and I realized I was part of the problem and that I should do something about that so that I was became part of the solution rather than the problem. The first time was when I was, you know, blacksmithing pitons, and we started making hard steel pitons because they could be used over and over again. And in America, we were coming from, you know, reading Thoreau and Emerson and John Muir, and, you know, the great naturists in America, and we felt like you shouldn't leave anything behind. Go into the wilderness, but leave nothing behind. Whereas the Europeans, their attitude was conquer the mountains and then make them easier for the next party. So they would make as cheap a pitons as they possibly could and then drive them into the rock and leave them there so that the next party would have an easier experience. And, you know, it was manifest destiny, kind of. And we thought that was wrong, that you should go into the wilderness and find no trace of having been there of anybody else. I made pitons out of hard steel that could be put in and taken out easily. But, you know, with every technology, there's an unintended consequence. Every single one. I've never seen an instance where there isn't. And when they got to be so many climbers putting in these pitons and taking them out, it was destroying the cracks. It was making, you know, a little crack this big suddenly was this big. And it was destroying the rock. And so I thought, I'm responsible for this, so I should do something about it. So then we came up with a different method of protection for climbing, where you take little aluminum chocks and just put them in with your fingers, pull them down, and they, you know, in a little wedge in a crack, and turns out they were just as safe as pitons. But then try to convince people who are, you know, pounding these pitons in with a 20-ounce hammer that they should rely on this with their lives. So then, you know, I've always felt the only way to lead is by example. So myself and another guy went and climbed a multi-day route on El Capitan in Yosemite using no hammers, just putting these little things in to show the world that you could get by with this. So that was my first real experience in seeing that I was the cause and that maybe I was also the solution.
That has been, the other thing that strikes me about that story is that you started out making products that people relied on for their lives. And that's got to have something to do with your firm insistence that quality is at the top of your list of priorities.
Yeah, you know, I think a lot of the problems that we're having as a society, as being an unsustainable society, I think can be solved through quality. When you're talking about employing people, technology is not going to employ people. It's going to destroy jobs. The more technology we have, the more robots we have, whatever it is, automated machines, it puts people out of work and doesn't necessarily make the best product. And take agriculture, for instance. You know, this industrial agriculture is feeding more people in the short term, but in the long term it's destroying millions of acres of cropland, it's polluting our planet, it's giving us food that is not as nutritious. And I think the solution in a lot of cases is what David Brower says, turn around and take a forward step. In other words, go back to labor-intensive organic agriculture, which employs people in meaningful work. I mean, I would much rather be picking fruit in an orchard than working at a computer all day. Physical gain, but if you compromise the process, you're an asshole when you start out and you're an asshole when you get back. Myself. I mean, for me, that's, whenever I'm stuck with a business problem, the answer is always quality. Increase the quality. As opposed to a lot of businesses say, oh, our profits are down this year. Decrease the quality. Decrease the service. You know, have our customer service move to India. Put less people on the phone and have a longer waiting period. Whatever it is, it's always decrease the quality. For me, the answer has been to increase the quality. And I think if we want to employ people in the world, we have to consume less, but consume better. In other words, make products that last a long time. They're multifunctional. One little part breaks down, you can repair it instead of throw the whole piece away, which is, you know, all electronics now. You can't repair any of that stuff. Yeah, I notice how they repair cars now. They take out entire units, throw them away and put another unit in instead of repairing the unit. I mean, I could go on forever about quality, but I think that's the key to changing our society. I had a house built recently out of all recycled materials. We built it out of broken up sidewalks, actually. 28-inch thick walls. I never have to heat it, never have to cool it. It's like living in a cave. It's sort of ambient temperature that's comfortable, and it's built to last 200 years. And it costs more to build it, but it won't, you know, you won't have to tear it down in 50 years and build another one and then another one.
And there's no real reason that it shouldn't last more than 200 years either if people, you know, if people maintain it as the years go by.
Yeah, I mean, look at the old brewery over here where we have our Patagonia store. That thing was built, what, 18th century? So it's still standing, built out of rock, and that's fantastic, I think.
No reason you can't keep on forever. You talk about Patagonia. At one point you say that you think of Patagonia as an ecosystem with its vendors and customers as an integral part of that system. That's a very different vision of a corporate structure. But tell me how that works.
I mean, I can say that our customers are very important to us because we do very little advertising. And so we rely on word of mouth from one customer telling another person about Patagonia. You know, on advertising, we spend 0.5% of sales on advertising, that's all. And so we feel like our customers are our friends, and then in our catalogs and stuff, we publish essays on trying to influence them to do the right thing as far as the environment goes. And what we're trying to do as a company is cause the least amount of harm in running a business. And in doing so, we want to influence other companies. So our mission statement is, you know, make the best product. So there's the quality part of it. Cause the least amount of harm, and that's the unintended consequences. In other words, educate ourselves so that we know what we're doing. And so we're not causing harm unintentionally or just through ignorance. And the last part is to use business to inspire and implement solutions to the environmental crisis. So that's the reasons why we're in business. And to do that, all of those things, is we have to make the best product. We have to cause the least amount of harm. Then the other part, the Zen master would say, the other part's going to happen. We are going to influence other companies. And in fact, we are. During the recession, this last recession, we grew 20, 25%, 30% every year, which is unusual for us. Normally we only grow very sustainably at 3 to 5%, because I don't want to have any, I want to be independent of the banks. So we've always grown very slowly. But in the recession, the demand for our goods shot up like crazy, because in a recession, people become very conservative. They don't buy things just because they're bored. They'll buy things they need, and they'll buy better quality. They'll last a long time. They'll buy a piece of clothing that's multifunctional. They'll buy a ski jacket that you can ski in, you can mountain climb in, you can put it over your suit in a city in a rainstorm. They won't buy a specific ski jacket that sits in your closet 10 months a year. So that's kind of the clothes that we make. And so it's kind of a holistic approach to business, where you're taking care of the damage that you do as much as you can, and you're involving your customer, and your customer is your best salesperson. And it all works so well that other companies are saying, what's going on with this Patagonia? I mean, look at them. They're a very successful company. They grew in a strong recession. Maybe we better think about doing some of the things that they're doing. So the last part of our mission statement is actually happening, where we are influencing other companies and governments as well. A few years ago, Walmart called us. I mean, Walmart's the 11th largest economy in the world. There's only 10 countries larger than the Walmart company. And they called us and said, we want to send some people out to see your company. So they sent, I don't know, 7 or 9 people out, executives, to study what we were doing, because they had a mandate from the Walton family to green Walmart. And so they visited us, and we showed them around, and so that was the end of it, I thought. But then they called me about a year later and wanted me to come to Bentonville, Arkansas, to give a talk to 1,200 of their buyers for the company. And it was a little conference for their buyers, where they were going to announce that part of the buyers' jobs from now on is to buy greener products and work only with suppliers that are willing to work on making their product more sustainable. So I gave a talk there, and one thing led to another, and then Walmart sent a letter out to, 50 of the largest clothing companies in the world, and said, come to New York and talk about doing a sustainability index for clothing. Like, it's kind of like organic standards for food or something. Nobody came. I mean, Walmart's got this terrible reputation. So Walmart came to us and said, would you co-sign a letter signed by Walmart and Patagonia to come to this conference? And so we did. Everybody came. So I thought, oh my God, this little David and Goliath thing, I always thought we were David, but now we're Goliath. So we started this sustainability index with, now we have about 50 companies that represent over 30% of the entire clothing and footwear sales in the world. These are all gigantic companies. And we're working on a sustainability index, which means, in brief, a couple of years from now, a customer can go into a department store and look at 5 brands of jeans on the table. And they can zap the barcode with whatever electronic gizmo they'll have a couple of years from now. And it'll tell them the whole history of those jeans, where they're made, whether it's a sweatshop, whether it's a responsible sewing factory, the fibers used in the jeans, whether they're organic cotton or non-organic cotton, whether they're polyester, whatever. It's going to have a rating, and that's the sustainability index. It'll have a rating on how responsibly those jeans were made. Each taxpayer. So now the consumer, now has a choice between buying responsibly or less responsibly.